about with Chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, Colorado Senator Cory Gardner. Senator, good to have you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Do you think that another Republican senator might defect and wipe out Betsy DeVos as a nominee? It'd be the first time we saw that since like 1925, where the ruling party didn't get the president's choice.
You know, obviously there's a lot of speculation, and I think a lot of people on the other side of the aisle are trying to make sure they talk to their talk to their Republican counterparts, trying to get them to break off of Mrs. DeVos. But I don't believe that will happen. I think the votes are there to confirm Betsy DeVos, even if it means a 50-50 vote with the vice president coming in for a tie.
Do you think Mitch McConnell should use the nuclear option, the constitutional question procedure, if it needs to be done?
Let me just say this. Neil Gorsuch has one of the brightest legal minds in our country, a sterling reputation, not only on the bench of the 10th Circuit Court where he serves, but amongst judges from around the country. And so I don't think the filibuster, the nuclear option, is even going to be something that we have to deal with, because he is going to get the votes that we need to confirm him. So I don't think the nuclear option is going to be discussed. I don't think it's going to be needed, because I believe he's going to receive bipartisan support.
If the Democrats hold firm on their idea that he is a hostile choice, that he is everything Scalia was and more in terms of hewing to a conservative model of justice, do you believe you can make the case to Democrats that they're wrong?
Well, I think if they believe he's such a bad judge today, why did 11 of them who are serving in the Senate today vote for him 10 years ago? He received unanimous approval by the United States Senate 10 years ago when he was placed on the 10th Circuit Court. Then U.S. Senator Ken Salazar from Colorado praised Neil Gorsuch as an impartial judge who could have the right temperament for the court. Again, this is somebody who has tremendous support across the aisle, and I don't believe that a 60-vote filibuster threat is actually going to be carried out, because he is going to have the support he needs. Now, look, one way or the other, he's going to become a justice of the Supreme Court.
Well, of course, and it does serve to note that Merrick Garland got the same overwhelming oral support by Democrats and Republicans. He didn't even get a hearing. All right, so let's move on.
Well, there's a significant difference between Judge Garland and Neil Gorsuch. Again, applying whether it's the Biden rule from his time in the Senate or what Chuck Schumer laid out in New York. This is apples to oranges comparison to say that Garland and Gorsuch are the same.
All right, so let's move on to foreign policy here. The president has a call with the Australian Prime Minister last weekend. The readout from the White House is remarkably different from what we now know took place on that call. It left the Australian Prime Minister feeling that he was bullied and feeling that he may need to bully back. Do you see this as a good thing to do to one of your best allies?
Look, Australia is a great ally. There's no doubt about that, and we will continue to be great allies going forward. A number of trade opportunities, a number of security operations that we perform and carry out together, and so we will always have a strong relationship with Australia. I only know what I've seen in open source reports and newspapers. I wasn't on the call. Believe it or not, President Trump doesn't invite us to be parts of phone calls with foreign leaders. The fact is this: Australia is a great ally. They will continue to be, and we need to work hard to make sure that our allies, whether it's Australia or the United Kingdom or other allies around the globe, know that the United States is going to stand strong with them, and that we have their backs.
How well do they know that, Senator, if the President of the United States hangs up on them in the middle of a phone call after berating them and leaving them feeling that they were bullied?
The White House. I don't speak for the White House. You'd have to ask the White House. But what I know is that we will continue to strengthen our relationship with Australia, as we do with allies around the globe, unlike the past 8 years where we saw tremendous weakness in U.S. leadership.
Well, no, but hold on a second. I know that I can speak to the White House about it. They just gave us a readout that was remarkably different than what happened on the actual call. I don't need to talk.
Were you on the call, Chris?
No, I wasn't. But we do have a readout of the actual verbatim of the call, and those excerpts give a very different picture, and they reflect very clearly the way that the Australian Prime Minister came out of it, and his reaction is being reported in Australia. So I'm asking you, how do you feel about the fact that who you're calling a great ally was just hung up on in the middle of a phone call?
Look,
and
you just admitted you weren't on the phone call. I wasn't on the phone call. The fact is, Australia is a great ally. We will continue to work with them on trade agreements, on national security issues, making sure that we're matching and meeting the threat of ISIS throughout the region that Australia sits in, whether it's Indonesia or other countries that have the growing threat of ISIS. And so the fact is this, Chris, you'd have to talk to the White House. I don't speak for the White House about this phone call, but I'm going to continue to work hard to make sure that Australia knows how important it is to this country.
Right, but I'm saying you don't care about what happened on that phone call. That's what I'm hearing from you.
Now you're trying to put words in my mouth. What I
because
care
you
about
won't
is
answer
making
the
sure that
question,
we have
Senator. It's a
strong
pretty
leadership.
straight question.
What we have to do is to make sure we have strong leadership around the globe to recover from the past 8 years of weakness. Look, what you've seen from this administration this week is standing up to Iran for the first time in 8 years. What you've seen from this administration is saying, hey, you know what, maybe a refugee policy that doesn't vet clearly enough is important to make sure that we have that vetting in place. This is a different administration. We have to remember that the past 8 years, there was an election. It's over. The past 8 years of leading from behind, that's over. And that's what we have to make sure our allies understand. Now,
How do they understand what
all
on notice
of our
means,
leaders
Senator?
expect to be treated with respect. Global leaders expect to be treated with respect, and that's important.
Well, if it's important and it didn't happen in the Australian Prime Minister call, how do you feel about that?
Yeah. Again, Chris, our leaders, their leaders, leaders around the globe deserve to be treated with respect. I don't speak for the president. I don't speak for the White House. I wasn't on the call, and I would expect the president of the United States to treat every leader around the globe with dignity and respect.
All right. Senator Cory Gardner, I appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you.
Alice. Repeal and replace. That's the mantra. That's what the big sell was for Trump to such a big part of the flyover states. Well, now Republican efforts to get that done have stalled. Some lawmakers admit the Affordable Care Act may never completely disappear for good and bad reasons. Joining us now, Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson, who wants an Obamacare fix. Senator, always appreciate you being on New Day to make the case.
Morning, Chris.
Is this a simple question of reality? That yes, the AC has problems, the AC-8 always had problems that needed to be addressed, that weren't addressed, and has it come down to repair, not replace?
Well, first of all, when I talk about repair, I'm talking about repairing all the damage done by Obamacare. Obamacare has created this enormous mess, this big mess, and I'm trying to fix that big mess. I don't think Obamacare is fixable, quite honestly. And the other reality is, we only have so much power to repeal just certain elements of Obamacare through reconciliation with 51 votes. The taxes, the subsidies, but so many of the market reforms, I would call them the market distortions that have caused premiums to skyrocket and out-of-pocket maximums and deductibles to skyrocket. Those, we're probably going to need 60 votes, and it doesn't sound like the Democrats are really willing to bear the responsibility of the mess they created. So when I'm talking about repair, I'm talking about repairing the mess caused by Obamacare.
So when you say mess, let's just take one step about how much of that is just a talking point, because you got tens of millions of people that are covered now that weren't covered and wouldn't have been covered.
The rate of cost.
The rate of cost.
A lot through Medicaid.
Well, right. And if you got that financing, you're going to have to figure out how to get those people care, right? Because that was a solution. The rate of cost increase.
Chris, it was interesting. Phil Graham wrote an interesting piece in the Wall Street Journal. Just through normal economic growth, millions of Americans would have gotten additional health care coverage. So I think the claim that Obamacare created so many more people with coverage, a growing economy would have done the same thing. Here's the mess.
I saw the Graham piece, Senator. He didn't say it would have been even. He didn't say it would have been even.
On the individual market, premiums have doubled and tripled in Wisconsin because of these market distortions, these market reforms. Premiums have doubled and tripled. That's the mess we're talking about. Right. People can't even afford to buy coverage.
I hear you, but I think that you're doing a little bit of some versus all here. I read the Graham piece. He's talking about
pretty good piece.
But he's talking about economic inertia, essentially about what would have happened anyway. He never said it would have been even. He said that there were forces economically in play anyway, but those are temporary forces. And again, it wasn't an equivalency. Second of all, yes, there are premiums going up. There are good reasons and bad reasons for that, but they're not going up for everybody. You're talking about 0.05% of the population, about 1.7 million families. Way too many, has to be fixed. But this notion that all of it is a mess, that nobody's got better care, that nobody's gotten better costs, that's not true. Do you have to be more realistic about the politics to get anything done?
I didn't say there wasn't some benefit. Obviously, when
of course you did. You just said it's a huge mess.
I said it's a big mess. But obviously, when you spend tens of billions of dollars subsidizing care, people are going to like that. Here's part of the problem. Because premiums have skyrocketed, as have out-of-pocket maximums deductibles, A lot of people being subsidized in terms of insurance by the American taxpayer can't even use the insurance because the deductibles are so high. So on an individual basis, there's been a lot of harm done. People like Gina Sell, who was a mom working a part-time job, had to quit her part-time job in Wisconsin, go to full-time to pay for her $8,000 per year premium increase. That's the kind of harm.
Absolutely.
That's the big mess that's been created here. And Chris, we didn't have to remake the insurance markets. We didn't have to create this mess, cause premiums to skyrocket to take care of the uninsured. There was a lot simpler way of doing it. That's what we're trying to get back to. So from what I've been saying for 2 years now is we need to repair the damage caused by Obamacare and transition to a system that will actually work, that will fulfill those goals of restrained costs, better quality, better access. Obamacare didn't do that. The Affordable Care Act is not affordable. It didn't protect patients. It's been a big mess. We're trying to repair that damage. We're trying to fix that mess.
And we'll see how much of it you keep as a reflection of what is actually working despite the politics. Let me ask you two other things quickly. One, do you think that there's been somewhat of a reset with foreign policy talk from the administration on Iran, on Russia, on even the settlements in Israel?
I wouldn't call it a reset. Obviously, I think what I would call it is we are starting to address the world from a position of strength and resolve. And that's what's required. You achieve peace through strength, not peace through withdrawal as President Obama implemented it. So it's first about becoming economically strong so we can stop hollowing out our military, make our military strong, actually have a commitment to defeating ISIS, securing our border. This is a position of strength, and that's really what President Trump is conveying right now.
You were in Israel. You say there's a lesson about wall and border security that you learned there that we need to take back here.
Israel was had a real problem with illegal immigrants coming in from the southern border, about 16,000 in 1 year. In 2 years, they constructed a 143-mile fence, about $2.9 million per mile, and it cut that illegal immigration rate from about 16,000 to, I think, 18. Cut it by 99%. Fencing walls work. And so we need to learn the lessons from Israel. They are under a constant state of threat of terrorism. They've dealt with it pretty effectively. We need to learn those lessons.
Do you think it was just the wall that they put up, or do you think it was all the attendant changes they made into screening and their opportunities that they provided for people who were coming across to try to limit the need to sneak in?
Well, on the southern border, it was the fence. Within the whole of Israel, they've done all kinds of things in terms of security, cybersecurity at their airports, all kinds of different layered security measures. We need to do the same thing here, but fencing and walls work, particularly when they're constructed in the right areas and in the right way.
And in conjunction with other policies. Senator,
Absolutely.
I always appreciate you being in. You always make the case in beautiful fashion. Appreciate you being on the
Have a great day.
You too. Allison.